Welcome to the congregation of Yahweh. We're here on Yahweh Sabbath Day. Greetings to those on the internet or those that might be watching live. We hope you enjoy the messages that go out. Today's message is entitled The Lost Sheep, and we're going to touch on the Messianic scriptures about different terms that are used about sheep and flocks and shepherds and things like that, and see where the background on these terms came from. I'm going to start off in Matthew chapter 9. And verse 35. And Yeshua went about all the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then said he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the master of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. And there's actually a connection here. These sheep were scattered because they didn't have a shepherd, and these sheep are the harvest. And to get these lost sheep back, they needed laborers to go out and get them. Chapter 10 of Matthew and verse 5. These 12 Yeshua sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And verse 16, Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And chapter 15 of Matthew, verse 21, Then Yeshua went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coasts, and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O master, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a demon. Another gospel says she's a Syrophoenician woman. But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she crieth after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Master, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. And she said, Truth, master, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from the master's table. Then Yeshua answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And the reason he said that her faith was great is she realized where the blessings were coming from, and that both the nations and Israel get their blessings from the same table, from the same master. Chapter 25 of Matthew, verse 31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all his angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Chapter 26 of Matthew and verse 31. Then said Yeshua unto them, All you shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. Luke chapter 12 and verse 31. But rather seek ye the kingdom of Yahweh, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give to you the kingdom. John chapter 10. I'm going to start in verse 7. This whole chapter pretty much discusses the relationship between the shepherd and the flock, the sheep, and other things going on, but I'm just pulling out a few details starting in verse 7. Then said Yeshua unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. We're going to find some details a little later on of how significant this statement really is. This shepherd is leading his sheep to good pastures. The thief cometh not, but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, sees the wolf coming, and leaves the sheep, and flees, and the wolf catches them, and scatters the sheep. The wolf scatters the sheep. That's also very significant. Skip down to verse 16. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. And verse 27, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Acts chapter 20. In verse 28, take heed therefore unto yourselves and to all the flock, over which the Holy Spirit hath made you overseers, to feed the assembly of Elohim, which he hath purchased with his own blood. For I know this, that after my departure shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing your flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things, to draw away disciples after them. And I was just reminded that after the resurrection, while Peter decided he was going fishing, 3 times he asked him, if you love me, and he said, feed my sheep. A paraphrase, I know he phrased it a little differently 3 times, but Hebrews chapter 30. Excuse me, there's no Hebrews 30. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 20. Now the Elohim of peace, that brought again from the dead our master Yeshua, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 25, for you were as sheep going astray, but are now returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls. Now, who's he talking to here? You were as sheep going astray. And we've already covered 2 verses where he said, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. If you go back to the beginning of Peter, it's addressed to the strangers who are scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. And then in chapter 2 and verse 9, it says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. This is quoting verses from Torah, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, out of ignorance into enlightenment. In verse 10, it gives us a clue who he's talking to. These lost sheep, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of Elohim, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Now let's go to Hosea chapter 1, and we'll find that this verse is taken out of two verses in Hosea chapter 1. This people that at one time was not a people, that at one time didn't receive mercy, but now are receiving mercy. Hosea chapter 1, and I'm going to start in verse 4. And Yahweh said unto him, call his name Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. He's saying he will cause the house of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, to cease. In verse 7, but I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by Yahweh their Elohim, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Now when she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said Elohim, call his name Lo-ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim. Yet the number of the children of Israel should be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. It shall come to pass that in the place where it is said unto them, you are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living El. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together, and appoint themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. So there was something that I was going to remember to point out in this chapter. Let me see if I yeah. Verse 6 says, for I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel. And then we read in Peter, it says, you who didn't receive mercy now receive mercy. So Peter is telling us who these sheep that were gone astray are. All right, Ezekiel chapter 34, another huge illustration of the sheep and the shepherd. And again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to pull out a few verses. Chapter 2 says, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say unto them, thus saith my sovereign Yahweh, unto the shepherds, woe be to the shepherds of Israel that do feed themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flocks? You eat the fat, and you clothe you with the wool. You kill them that are fed, but you feed not the flock. Verse 5, and they were scattered because there is no shepherd. That should ring a bell. Messiah looked on the people and had compassion on them because they were as sheep without a shepherd. My sheep wandered through all the mountains and upon every high hill. Yea, my flock was scattered upon all the face of the earth, and none did search or seek after them. Verse 11, for thus saith my sovereign Yahweh, behold, I, even I, will both search my sheep and seek them out, as a shepherd seeks out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered. And so will I seek out my sheep, and will deliver them out of all places where they have been scattered in the cloudy and dark day. And I will bring them out from the people, and gather them from the countries, and will bring them to their own land, and feed them upon the mountains of Israel, by the rivers, and in all the inhabited places of the country. I will feed them in good pasture. And I believe this is actually specifically telling us a time period, being fed on the mountains, which we'll touch on that in a few minutes. But he's leading his people to a mountain to be fed with good pasture. I will feed them in good pasture, and upon the high mountains of Israel shall their fold be, There shall they lie in a good fold, and in a fat pasture shall they feed upon the mountains of Israel. I will feed my flock, and I will cause them to lie down, saith the sovereign Yahweh. I will seek that which was lost, the lost sheep. Skipping down to verse 17, and as for you, O my flock, thus saith my sovereign Yahweh, behold, I judge between cattle and cattle, between rams and the he-goats. And verse 20, the second part says, I judge between the fat cattle and between the lean cattle. It seems almost reminiscent of what he said in Matthew. At his return, he would separate the sheep from the goats, which it's not a direct connection, but sounds very similar. Verse 18, seemeth it a small thing unto you to have eaten up the good pasture? Here he's talking to the shepherds. The shepherds have eaten up the good pasture themselves. But you have trodden down with your feet the residue of your pastures, and to have drunk of the deep waters, but you must foul the residue with your feet. They've trampled what the sheep are supposed to be eating. The sheep are supposed to be eating the good pasture, which I believe is his word. But the shepherds have trampled the pastures. Verse 19, and as for the flock, they eat that which you have trodden down. The only pasture, that the sheep were getting is what the shepherds have trampled. Jeremiah chapter 23. Jeremiah 23 and verse 1. Woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, saith Yahweh. Therefore thus saith Yahweh Elohim of Israel against the pastors that feed my people, you have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doings, saith Yahweh, and I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries where I have driven them, and will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. And I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, saith Yahweh. Behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. In his days Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely, and this is his name whereby he shall be called Yahweh, our righteousness. So how did this scattering of the sheep take place? And why is there a need to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 25 says, when thou shalt beget children and children's children, and you shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, and make a graven image or the likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of Yahweh thy Elohim, to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto you go over Jordan to possess it. You shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And Yahweh shall scatter you amongst the Gentiles, and you shall be left few in number amongst the heathen, where Yahweh shall lead you. And there you shall serve mighty ones, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But if from thence thou shalt seek Yahweh thy Elohim and thou shalt find him, if you seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul, when thou art in tribulation, and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days. If thou turn to Yahweh thy Elohim, and shalt be obedient unto his voice, for Yahweh thy Elohim is a merciful El, he will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them. But through disobedience, the house of Israel was scattered, and he said that these things are going to come upon you, and in the latter days, if you search him out, he will be found and he won't forget the covenant of the fathers. And the covenant to Abraham was through his seed, all of the nations, all of the Gentiles of the earth would be blessed, and that his seed would be as numerable as the stars of heaven and as the sand of the seashores. And the regathering of the sheep is how that is being accomplished and will be accomplished at the Messiah's return. Chapter 28 of Deuteronomy, starting in verse 63. And it shall come to pass that as Yahweh rejoiced over you to do good and to multiply you, so Yahweh will rejoice over you to destroy you and bring you to nothing. And you shall be plucked from off the land whether you go to possess. And Yahweh shall scatter you amongst all people from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there you shall serve other mighty ones, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And amongst these nations, amongst the Gentiles, thou shalt find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but Yahweh shall give thee there a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. And he goes on to list devastation that would happen amongst the nations. Chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, starting in verse 1. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind amongst all the nations, whither Yahweh thy Elohim hath driven thee, and shalt return unto Yahweh thy Elohim, and shalt obey his voice, according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul, that then Yahweh thy Elohim will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all nations. This theme is repeated over and over in scriptures. The scattering throughout all the earth, dispersed amongst all nations, and then going into the nations, into the heathen, and bringing his people out. And I believe that this began when the Messiah said, I did not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And when Peter and Paul received their visions to go out to the nations, he had to call everybody to get them to come back. If they're dispersed amongst everybody, he had to send the invitation to everybody. Nehemiah chapter 1. This was being hard to find. Somebody tried to get me to mark my pages a long time ago, and I should have listened. Anybody want to give me Nehemiah 1:9? I meant, does anybody want to read it? Anybody want to read Nehemiah 1:9?
Nehemiah 1, you said?
Sure.
Read it. No, I have an accent. That's okay.
Read it.
I like your accent. Okay. Go ahead, please.
These are the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah.
Is that Nehemiah 1:9?
That's not Nehemiah. Just read it from here. 9:1. 1:9, right?
1:9.
Yeah, right
But
here.
you shall turn back to me and guard my commands and do them. Though you were cast out to the end of the heavens, I shall gather them from there and bring them to the place which I have chosen to make my name dwell there.
Yeah. And one thing that's very interesting, and I'm not sure if I read it a minute ago, but this is almost quoting verbatim another verse out of Deuteronomy. And the details of this verse really caught my attention. Now that I'm in Nehemiah, let me just go over it one more time and focus in on something. But if you turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heavens, if you were cast out to the heavens, yet will I gather thee from thence. If you were scattered to the heavens, I will gather you from there. And another verse also says that if you were scattered to the uttermost parts of the heavens, from there I would. And I'll tell you why that's so interesting here in just a minute. Let me cover a few more. Go back to Jeremiah chapter 31. And verse 10. Hear the word of Yahweh, O you nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. He scattered his sheep, and he's going to regather his sheep. Chapter 32 of Jeremiah, in verse 37. Behold, I will gather them out of all countries where I have driven them in my anger and in my fury and in great wrath, and I will bring them again into this place and will cause them to dwell safely. And they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim, and I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever, for the good of them and of their children after them. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, that I will not turn away from them to do them good, but I will put my fear in their hearts. Notice this, Yahweh says He's going to put the fear in their hearts. And He's also the one that puts a new spirit in us and causes us to obey Him, according to Ezekiel 36. The restoration of His people, there's always something that He does to His people for the restoration. Ezekiel chapter 20, be closing out here in just a couple minutes. Ezekiel chapter 20 and verse 34. And I will bring you out from the people, and will gather you out of all the countries where you were scattered, with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm and with fury poured out. Now this gathering right here seems supernatural. It sounds reminiscent of the Exodus from Egypt, with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm. I believe that's actually quoted verbatim about the Exodus story. Verse 40 of the same chapter. For in mine holy mountain, and in the mountain of the height of Israel, saith my sovereign Yahweh, there shall all the house of Israel, all of them in the land, serve me. There will I accept them, and there will I require your offerings and the first fruits of your oblations with all your holy things. I will accept you with your sweet Savior when I bring you out from the people and gather you out of the countries where you have been scattered, and I will be sanctified in you before the heathen. And you shall know that I am Yahweh when I bring you into the land of Israel, into the country for the which I lifted up my hand to give it to your fathers. Chapter 28 of Ezekiel and verse 25. Thus saith my sovereign Yahweh, when I shall have gathered the house of Israel from the people among whom they were scattered, and shall be sanctified in them in the sight of the heathen, then shall they dwell in their land that I have given to my servant Jacob, and they shall dwell safely therein, and shall build houses and plant vineyards. Yea, they shall dwell with confidence when I have executed judgments upon all those that despise them round about them, and they shall know that I am Yahweh their Elohim. Chapter 36 of Ezekiel, verse 24. For I will take you out from amongst the heathen, and gather you out of all countries, and will bring you into your own land. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness, and from all your idols will I cleanse you. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you shall keep my judgments and do them. And you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I will be your Elohim. Chapter 39 of Ezekiel, and verse 27. When I have brought them again from the people, and gathered them out of their enemies' lands, and am sanctified in them in the sight of many nations, then shall they know that I am Yahweh their Elohim, which caused them to be led into captivity amongst the heathen. But I have gathered them into their own land, and have left none of them any more there. Neither will I hide my face any more from them, for I have poured out my spirit upon the house of Israel, saith the sovereign Yahweh. Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah 11:11. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh, that Yahweh shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. He will gather the dispersed from the four corners of the earth. And Micah chapter 2, Micah chapter 2 and verse 12. I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel, and will put them together as the sheep of Bozrah, as the flock in the midst of their fold. They shall make great noise by reason of the multitude of men. Now, I want to look at Matthew chapter 24. Just about to close out here, I promise. It's a lot of information. But I'm trying to, pull out all these sheep and shepherds, these verses, and show the significance of these things, the prophetic significance of these things. Matthew 24. Now, previously we read in Matthew 25, it says, when the Son of Man returns, he's going to judge between the sheep and between the goats, and he's going to bring the sheep into the kingdom. Now, let's look at one chapter prior in 24 and 29. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. That's what caught my attention about those previous verses about being gathered from the heavens. So here we have the great sound of a trumpet, and he's going to gather his elect from the heavens, and that trumpet should ring a bell. That's what people use in Thessalonians to, the dead in Messiah shall rise first. And they take that as there's a resurrection, and he takes the resurrected to planet heaven somewhere. But the fulfillment of all Scripture, what all the Scriptures that we've read thus far is looking for, is his people being gathered together and taken back to the land. The promise that was given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to his seed, would to one day return to the land, not go to planet heaven. That's just a twisting of scriptures. So this regathering, and the reason the reason he's gathering his elect from the heavens and taking them to the land, that ties in with, he says, I'm going to do it with a mighty and stretched out arm. He's going to do it. A lot of people call this the greater Exodus. And they see a greater Exodus in Scripture, but they don't know exactly. You know, I heard a guy who does a long series on the greater Exodus. He said, but I just don't know how it's going to happen. Well, it's going to happen right here. There's going to be a sign in the heavens, and people are going to mourn, and they're going to see the Son of Man coming with power and glory. And Revelations talks about that time where people will be running and hiding in the rocks from the wrath of the Lamb. And at that time, when he returns, he's going to separate the sheep from the goats, and he's going to take his sheep into the kingdom. And at that time, Isaiah chapter 2 is going to be fulfilled. The law will go forth from Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem at the mountain. It says that the mountain in Israel will be established, and at that time the law will go forth from Zion and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. We also read a verse where he said, I will put shepherds over them. I believe that's the kings and priests of Revelations that will reign with the Messiah for the 1,000 years, because the Messiah is not going to run around teaching the law and the word by himself to the masses. He's going to set up kings and priests, the shepherds, who are going to feed the flocks for 1,000 years. Hallelujah.